You have probably met someone who can walk into almost any room, start talking to strangers, and somehow the conversation never seems to stop while others struggle to think of even one sentence after the first greeting. Research shows your brain often treats silence like social danger, which triggers anxiety and makes your mind suddenly go blank. But the people who never run out of things to say are not naturally gifted talkers. They simply understand how conversations actually work. Most people think, great, communicators are fast thinkers, but psychology says the real difference is something called conversational curiosity. Curiosity shifts your brain from performance mode into discovery mode, where you stop worrying about saying the perfect thing. When your mind becomes curious, questions and observations begin appearing naturally. Think about a time you spoke to someone who seemed relaxed and interesting at the same time. They were not trying to impress you, they were simply exploring ideas. Your brain senses that openness and it becomes easier to respond, which creates a smooth back and forth flow. This is why conversations with curious people feel effortless and natural. Research shows the human brain loves talking about personal experiences because it activates the reward system. When someone asks about your story, your thoughts, your opinions, your brain releases dopamine, which makes the conversation feel enjoyable. People who never run out of things to say understand this and gently guide conversations toward experiences rather than random facts. There's also something psychologists call the spotlight effect, where your brain convinces you that everyone is judging every word you say. When this happens, your attention turns inward and suddenly your mind freezes. But confident communicators focus outward on a person instead of their own performance. Your brain works much better when it is observing instead of overthinking, which is why good conversationalists constantly notice small details. They might comment on the environment, a shared moment, or something the person just mentioned. Those simple observations become natural bridges to new topics. Psychology says conversations actually run on something called association thinking, where one idea naturally leads to another. Your brain already does this every day when memories trigger other memories, or when a song reminds you of a place. People who never run out of things to say simply allow that chain of thoughts to happen out loud. Imagine someone mentioning they just returned from a trip. Your brain might instantly think about travel, food culture, or even a funny airport story. Most people ignore these thoughts because they think they are not interesting enough. But experienced communicators understand that sharing small associations keeps conversations alive. Research shows another powerful psychological concept called emotional mirroring, where people unconsciously match the emotional tone of others. If you speak with energy, curiosity, and warmth, the other person's brain automatically begins reflecting that same feeling. This emotional synchronization makes the conversation flow naturally. On the other hand, when someone speaks while worrying about running out of things to say, their tone becomes hesitant and their brain signals uncertainty. Your brain quickly senses this tension and the conversation slows down. That is why relaxed curiosity is more powerful than clever words. Psychology also explains something known as the self-disclosure effect, which means people feel closer to someone who shares small personal thoughts. When someone says something simple like, "I always get nervous speaking to new people," the atmosphere instantly becomes more human. This honesty creates connection, which keeps conversations moving. Your brain is wired to respond to stories much more than plain information, because stories activate imagination and emotional memory. That is why people who talk in short stories rarely run out of things to say. Every memory, every experience, every observation becomes potential conversation fuel. Think about someone describing a simple moment like getting lost in a new city and accidentally discovering a small cafe. Even a small story like that can spark multiple new topics: travel, food culture, memories. Stories naturally expand conversations in ways simple statements cannot. Research shows that when people feel emotionally safe, their brain becomes more creative with thoughts and responses. This is known as psychological safety, which allows both people in a conversation to express ideas without fear of judgment. People who talk easily often create this atmosphere without even realizing it. Your brain becomes more relaxed when someone listens with genuine attention because it signals acceptance and validation. When you feel heard, you automatically want to continue sharing more thoughts. This is why great conversationalists often listen more than they speak. Another interesting concept, psychology, mentions is cognitive load, which means your brain can only focus on a limited number of thoughts at once. When you are worrying about how you sound, your brain uses energy that could have been used to think of new ideas. Once that pressure disappears, conversation becomes effortless. Think about the difference between talking to a close friend and talking to someone you just met with the fear of awkward silence. With your friend, words come naturally because your brain feels safe and relaxed. The same ability exists in every conversation once that pressure disappears. Psychology says humans are naturally wired for storytelling and connection because communication helped our ancestors survive and cooperate. Your brain actually wants to talk. It simply shuts down when it senses judgment or pressure. Removing that pressure unlocks the natural flow again. People who never run out of things to say also understand the power of simple follow-up questions. When someone mentions something interesting, they gently explore it. Instead of switching topics immediately, this allows the conversation to grow deeper instead of ending too quickly. Your brain enjoys expanding topics step by step because it creates a sense of shared discovery. One small comment can slowly turn into a long conversation about memories, experiences, and perspectives. That is how ordinary moments turn into meaningful discussions. Research shows conversations become memorable when emotions are involved, not when information is impressive. People remember how they felt during the interaction, much more than the exact words spoken. Good communicators focus on feelings, curiosity, and connection. This is why someone who talks about everyday experiences in a relatable way often seems more engaging than someone who shares complex facts. Your brain connects easier with stories, emotions, and shared human moments. Relatability keeps conversations alive longer than intelligence alone. Another psychological principle called the reciprocity effect explains why conversations naturally expand when one person shares openly. When someone reveals a small thought or experience, your brain feels encouraged to share something in return. This mutual exchange keeps the dialogue flowing. You might notice that people who speak often react to what you say rather than preparing their next sentence in advance. Their attention stays fully in the moment, which allows their brain to generate responses naturally. Presence is often more important than cleverness. Research shows that when your mind stays present during a conversation, your brain processes information faster and more creatively. This makes it easier to respond with new ideas, stories, or questions. Presence turns conversations into living interactions instead of rehearsed exchanges. Your brain also loves novelty, which means it becomes interested whenever a new angle or perspective appears. People who talk icily often introduce small, unexpected thoughts that refresh the conversation. Even a simple observation can spark curiosity. For example, someone might say that rain always makes them feel strangely calm, which suddenly invites a deeper conversation about moods and memories. Small, unusual thoughts often open doors to meaningful discussions. Curiosity begins expanding again. Psychology says validation is one of the strongest social signals humans respond to. When you acknowledge someone's thoughts, your brain communicates respect and understanding. That validation encourages the other person to continue sharing more ideas. People who never run out of things to say often validate others naturally by showing genuine interest in what they hear. Instead of quickly changing topics, they build on what was said. This keeps the conversation growing organically. At the end of the day, the secret is surprisingly simple. Your brain already knows how to create endless conversation. When curiosity replaces pressure, when attention replaces self-doubt, when connection replaces performance, words begin appearing naturally, and the silence that once felt awkward slowly becomes just another moment in a conversation that keeps flowing effortlessly.